champions here. That's right. 3, 2, 1. Let's go. I gave me a talent, so let me flaunt the gift.
Broadcasting live from the Property Cashflow Studios, this is the Property Cashflow Experience, the world's leading podcast on building cash flow in property, real estate, fast. Hosted by the Cashflow King and your favorite mentor, the possibility of living the life you desire starts here.
Damn.
Let's get ready to rumble!
Welcome to another episode of the Property Cashflow Show. I'm your host, Neil, and I'm here with my wingman, Mr. Dwayne Squires.
Hello all. It feels like a long time since we've done a podcast together.
Yeah, it's been a couple of weeks.
Yeah. So I'm really looking forward and excited for us to get together and talk about some more podcasts and some key things that's happened in the last few weeks. It's been busy. Really busy.
Really busy. Actually, one of the things that we're going to talk about today, someone was asking how we did so much sourcing last week. So last week we sourced 16 rent-to-rent leads.
Boom. Yep.
In 1 week, so it's like 6 days. That was 16 leads in 6 days. So I guess to most people watching or listening, they're probably like, that seems impossible.
Yeah.
How is that even physically possible? But to you and I, that was like, we really didn't put that much effort in, did we?
No, we're just getting the start, the momentum behind it.
That was just the start.
Yeah.
We'll probably get it up to, I would say at full capacity, 40, 45 leads a week.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's true. Yeah. Because when you look at it, we had only started it for 2 weeks before then. Yeah. So if we're getting those results, we just need to escalate it even further, which we'll easily do.
Yeah, definitely. So let's have a chat about that then. And let's just talk into some of the sourcing strategies we did and how we went on the leads and what happened with the landlords and stuff like that. We'll probably talk about a couple of the funny leads and landlords on another episode. No, let's cover one of them today. But let's start with what people are going to be asking, which is how we actually started with the sourcing. So do you want to talk about the plan a little bit and what we planned out in the first place? Yeah,
definitely. So I think the first thing to realize is you don't just go at it with a shotgun. You don't go out with an automatic rifle. There's a bit of planning that needs to happen. So Neil and I, a few weeks back, set some time apart, a couple of hours, just say, okay, what's going to be the most bang for our buck? And it really applies to the 80-20. There's so many things that you can apply to try and generate leads. And I know you've got a video that highlights it, and there's a mind map where you can look at 10, 20, 30 different ways of generating leads, if not more. But we said, well, based upon our experience, what's going to be the biggest return on our time invested? So that took a couple of hours to figure out what we were going to apply. Yeah. And then specifically, what we introduced was 4 or 5 things that we did. So our website, we revamped that. Yeah. And that generated a few leads from there. And that's going to be quite consistent because it's ranking quite high on SEO. We're going to be doing a bit more behind that as well. But when you look at it, we did website, newspaper, we did Gumtree, and cold calling, and a few more things as well as the HMO list. So when you look at it, it was 5 things that we did. Yeah.
So I think most of those leads, correct me if I'm wrong, came from Gumtree. So either our post, our advert on Gumtree, or cold calling through Gumtree. Was that most of them?
So it was a mix. So we had a number that came through Gumtree.
Yeah. So we had Sunny. He was 70-year-old landlord. He was Gumtree. Yeah. Manoj, where did he?
He was cold calling.
Through which platform?
Open Rent.
Open Rent. So you saw it on Rightmove Open Rent.
Yeah.
So that was that one. Then we had Catherine, which was a letter.
Yeah. So that's a good one actually.
That was a really good one.
Yeah. So when you look at Catherine, she was a bit different. So one thing you have to realize when we'll be going around to the several properties that we've got in one location. And there's one property that we manage where consistently over the summertime, and the audience probably know we refurbished loads of houses over summer.
Yeah, we did like 10 refurbs. 10 refurbs in one month basically, didn't we?
And I think you call it the marathon. So what we did is we were doing refurbishing the houses, and by refurbishing the houses, we kept on coming across a property next door to the house that we're managing.
Yeah, just next door.
And it was always empty. And we then didn't pay too much attention, but you just make a mental note.
Mm-hmm.
And then a few weeks after that, we just kept on seeing it was empty, made a mental note. And then I think it was around November or December time, the property was still empty.
Yeah.
And we were like, well, let's send a letter to the landlord. Mm-hmm. So this isn't something we consistently do. It's only when we see an opportunity where we see it's a property that's empty, we'll send a handwritten letter. So you wrote a really, really good, concise handwritten letter to the landlord. And that was back in November or December time. Uh-huh. And then out of the blue, we got a phone call.
Yeah. Actually, I gave him my personal phone number on there. But because it was a few weeks before the call, I completely forgot I'd given her my phone number. Yeah. So when she phoned, I saw the number and I thought, I don't recognize that number. Because only 10 people have got my phone number or something. So when that came through, I thought, who's this calling me? So I didn't even answer it. And then it said, it was I wouldn't say elderly lady, but she's a lot older. She's 70, I think. Is that she's about that age? Yeah. Yeah. So I thought, who's this lady on my? Because people that age talk very differently. Yeah. So I called her back, and then I was like, oh, okay. And then it was Mrs. And her husband's Mister. So it wasn't first names and things like that. And she said that I'd written the letter to her. She picked it up over Christmas, and then it all started to make sense why the property was empty as well, because when you get to that age. You're retired, you've got money. She lives with her husband. They live in a wealthy area. Yeah. To them, she has no mortgage on the property. Yeah. Her husband really isn't that interested either. When we went for the viewing, that was funny, wasn't it? Because he was just like winking at us and, nudging us.
Darling, I think so it's like 4:00.
Yeah, yeah.
It was around 4:30 and he's like, darling, I just want to let you know we've got dinner plans.
Yeah, dinner plans.
And they said we need to be there at 6:30.
Yeah. and then he, as I'm walking, he'd go, yeah, don't worry, you're good. And he gave me a nudge and a wink and I was like, he didn't even hear what we said. We could have been anyone. And he's saying, yeah, you're good. Yeah. So that was good. Actually, we'll talk on that on the next podcast because that was an amazing deal. So that was that one.
We also had so handwritten letter. That's where Mrs. came from. We had Philip that came through HMO list. So we had one landlord there. Then we had Toyin who came from cold calling as well.
Yes,
which was through Gumtree actually.
Yeah, so a lot of them were. So that was like 2 or 3 of them through Gumtree. One was through Open Rent. One was HMO list, and one was from a letter. Yeah, that's it. So. For everyone listening, they're probably thinking, whoa, that came from everywhere. But there was a clear plan behind it, wasn't there? Yeah. So we all we knew these were the avenues that we were choosing. So just to repeat, so newspaper, Gumtree, cold calling, website, HMO list, and handwritten letters. Yeah, well, even the newspaper, that's only just started. So we haven't even generated the leads from that yet.
Yeah, and that's a good thing that you raised there. So when you look at the cost of advertising, all of them. So newspaper is probably one of the highest spend ones. Yeah. But when you look at it, it's a different mindset behind a newspaper. You won't necessarily get leads straight away. It's going to be consistent. And people keep on reading newspaper and seeing our advertisement and say, okay, these guys must be legit because I keep on seeing them week in, week out. And then over time, we'll be generating it. So when you look at it, you've got direct marketing that would generate instant leads. Yeah. But then you've also got the newspaper, which helps with branding, but also generating leads too. Yeah,
definitely.
Yeah. So that was a mix of how we did it. And one thing to note is we will keep on recording all our data.
Definitely.
So we recorded how many. So when you look at cold calling, that's interesting. We'll have to talk a bit more after. But with cold calling, we'll record every time we made a phone call. Yeah. With the HMO list, how many letters we sent, how many handwritten letters did we send, how many Gumtree ads did we put out, and then how many inquiries we received and how many appointments. So there's a whole tracker behind that. Yeah. And that allows us, as you know, to retrospectively review and say, okay, where are we doing well and where could we improve and put some more time behind it.
Yeah, I think one important point as well, because some people will be listening, they're saying, well, you know what, Neil, Dwayne, I haven't got, hundreds of pounds in order to spend money on all this advertising, right? That's what some people will be thinking. But actually, if you think about where the majority of those leads came from, no money was spent on those things.
Yeah. So when you look at it this way, so I'm just making a few notes.
Yeah.
But so newspaper ad, it costs a few £100s.
Yeah,
So,
it does.
but we explained the reason why we do that for branding as well as generating leads. The Gumtree ads, only maybe a 30 quid. Wasn't that much spent behind it, but it generated some good leads behind it. Cold calling, absolutely zero.
Free.
Absolutely zero. So when you look at, if you go back one step, the Gumtree ad, just don't go out for dinner for 1 week, and then you've got your ad spend covered on that
Even
element.
then, you don't necessarily have to do what we do, which is a promoted advert. You can just put up a normal advert, because the landlords who are quite motivated will scour through all the adverts anyway, looking for the perfect person that wants their property.
Yeah, exactly.
So,
exactly.
So I would say, if you haven't got the money, you need to make up for it with something else.
Yeah.
And that something else is courage.
Yeah, and that's where cold calling comes into place.
Yeah.
So that was an interesting one. So, my background with other companies, we've used a lot of marketing, but cold calling hasn't really been something that we've actually done. So that's quite new for me.
Yeah.
And because it's a new marketing, the way we work and the way I like to work in general is don't delegate something until you are proficient at something. So the cold calling is what we enacted. And so when we were doing it, I know you were next to me listening to how and we wrote a few scripts out to follow. And when we were making those calls, we had if we didn't get through to the vendor, leave a voice message. But we made around 30 calls in one day. So we just went on it, just kept on going. But my heart was pounding. My heart was pounding. You're like, I think for one vendor I spoke to, she was asking questions.
Yeah.
She was going for it. And to make sure, because it's always good if you've got a partner, so that even though that partner might not be speaking, so in the case of us, it was you weren't speaking, but you're observing, listening. And you could see that she was going off. She was asking questions like, how long have you been in the business? What are you going to do here? What are you going to do there?
Yeah.
Before I've even finished the answer in one question, she's moving on to another. But it was interesting, wasn't it? It was good feedback to realize, okay, there's a few tweaks that need to be made, how to build a rapport over time, etc.
And just on that, landlord, as I said to you when doing that feedback from the call, because I've done this for years. Cold calling, sales is my background anyway, sales and things. So you never really, I don't think anyone really ever gets rid of that pounding heart or that stomach feeling. You always still have it to some extent the first time you start. So if you do it every day, the first call you make every morning, you're still going to have that little feeling.
Yeah.
It gets less and less, but it's always there.
Yeah.
I don't know anyone that just is like, let me pick up the phone and just call this guy. But even when you were on the phone to that lady, I was like, I could feel what you were going through.
Yeah.
Because she was really grilling you.
Yeah.
And again, it's similar with what I told you about when I met with Manoj on Saturday, where he really grilled me as soon as I first got to meet him. And it's the same principle. Whenever someone grills you like that, it's because something has happened to them to cause them to act in that way. That's a bit, not aggressive, but
defensive.
not confrontational. It's more like, it's sort of, if you take confrontation on a scale of 1 to 10, it's like a 2 or a 3, right? It's like something's happened and it's obvious something's happened to them. And the worst thing that people can do is try and be like dominant back to them and try and, talk into what they're, like going on about. So what I always do is just listen, nod, smile. And what I'm doing is I'm looking for the root cause. I'm looking for what is actually going on here. And it's the same thing with that lady, same with Manoj, who I met on Saturday. I knew there was something there. And then eventually into the call, the lady said to you, what did she say? She'd been...
Yeah, so she had problem tenants. So for that specific house that we were calling her about, she had tenants there that she had to go through the eviction courts. So they hadn't been paid for months on end, went through a long process with the judicial system. So they were feeling a lot of pain and distrust of individuals in general. Yeah.
And that's usually... I mean, I've never come across someone like a landlord or a buyer or anything like that was just, let's say, quite, in your face from the get-go for no reason. There's always a reason. And I'm not there to, like, that's not our job as property people. It's not our job to judge them or feel like, how dare they talk to me like that? Because at the end of the day, it's business is business.
Yeah.
Like, and I look at it as I never want to leave money on the table.
Yeah.
Someone wants to do business with me, I'll do business with them. And if they are a little bit rude at the start, okay, fine. It's not usually rudeness again. It's usually that something has occurred that's caused them to act in that way. I've got nothing against that. It's just human nature. I'm the same. When I go to, let's say, a car dealership, right? For everyone that's read my books, I always give these examples. If I go to a car dealership, the person who comes over and he's all smiley and slimy and slick looking, I don't want to see that guy. I want to see the old boy or the old girl in the shop. They're looking a little bit rough around the edges. They're the ones I want to speak to. The ones that look very motherly or fatherly, you know, because the slick people will say anything to get you to buy. They'll tell you, oh, yes, this car, yeah, you know, it might do 40 miles per gallon or something. Oh yeah, this car can do 150 miles per gallon. Like they'll come up with anything just so you'll buy, you know?
That's a good point. Because when I was going through it, I was ringing, heart pounding, stomach was turning, and that can come off on the phone as nervous. And we forget that when you're providing a service like rent to rent or guaranteeing someone's rent, you're actually providing the landlord or the vendor a great service. Yeah. Now, typically when we do marketing or marketing our experience, it's the vendor's coming to you. So you've got that straight away. You've got that element of power. Yes. They have come into me, but in this case with cold calling, you're reaching out to them, and then you're trying to flip the switch so that they are convinced that you're the right service. But when you look at it, and I remember I think it was a few phone calls into it saying, "Look, Dwayne, remember, we're providing a great service. It's really whether they want to take advantage of saving themselves £1,000 of money as well as time to use our service, or they don't." Yeah. And I think that helped a lot. That helped a significant amount, because I think after that, that's when became more calmer, became more diligent in how we script things and how we talk, and that led on to us generating more leads like Toyin and Manoj, etc. Yeah. So one thing for people at home is that, you know, the way I always look at it is if someone's trying to rush you on a call and they're being quite like, well, tell me, how much are you going to give me? What about this? What about that? The first thing I do is I slow things down. Yeah. All the time. Because if the biggest mistake people make is they talk into that. So, okay, so tell me, when was your company established? Oh, and if you go, oh, well, it was established 2 years ago or 1 year ago, they're going to be like, right, well, I don't do business with you. You know? So if they're really fast paced with me, I'll just slow them down, really slow them down. And every question they ask me, I'm going to pause. I'm going to think quite methodically, and I'm going to speak a lot slower. And what happens is at first they'll get frustrated and they'll try and speak faster again. But after 2 or 3 times, as long as you don't give in to that, they'll slow down. And what happens is they'll get more calm. And then once they get to a point of calmness, then you can have a proper conversation with them. But when it's really high pace like that, there's no point. No one will get anywhere with people like that. I think that's a really good point. Really good point. So although we've been doing cold calling, so that advice right there, anyone that's listening, take that on board, because that's a golden nugget right there. So slow them down, because typically when you're speaking to someone on the phone, so in your mind, you're mentally thinking, okay, I'm coming to you, I'm trying to convince you, and then they're firing question after question. Your response is, okay, they're going quick, I'm going to give a quick answer. But what you've just said there is slow it down so they actually take time to think about what you're offering. Yeah. Think about what solution you're giving them to the problem they have. So I think that's a powerful, powerful tip right there. Yeah, so a point on that is that if you think when you were a child, for example, this is more of a psychological thing. You remember when an adult was talking fast and quite loud at you? What did that mean? Dwayne, did you do this? Yeah. You think, oh, am I in trouble? So you're trying to avoid getting yourself in trouble. It's the same principle on a phone call. When that lady's like, okay, Dwayne, tell me this, tell me that, tell me that. You go into that mindset again. So for me, one of the things I learned when I was a kid was that, okay, now if I keep talking really fast, my parents are going to know I'm guilty. So I'm just going to slow it down. Huh? What do you mean? Cookies? I didn't see any cookies. Yeah. I can ask my brother.
He might have seen the cookies.
Yeah.
He had his friend over. It could have been him. I ate the cookies, Dwayne, just so you know, right? I ate those cookies. But that's how I learned that principle. So when you got someone that's quite like in your face and like asking really fast, if you just slow them down, what happens is this is a rapport break. And most people are afraid of doing this. They're afraid of doing a rapport break because they want to stay in rapport. You know, it's like when you meet someone for the first time, you don't know them, and they say to you, oh, I'm a vegetarian or I'm a vegan. And you might not be a vegetarian or vegan. So you don't instead say, well, I love a good steak. You would say, oh, that's interesting. I've been watching some documentaries on Netflix recently about veganism. Very interesting. Yeah. I've been trying this diet myself. I've been eating this. I had a vegan. Right?
Yeah.
Do you get what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's a distinction that people can learn from it when they're negotiating. And at the same time, you know, that nothing bad is going to happen from that phone call. It's this fear that we have. But at the end of the day, if that person doesn't want to do business with you, next, there's another 100 phone numbers online right now with properties to rent. Just call the next one up.
Yeah, I think that's powerful, especially with cold calling. So it's the fear of rejection. With cold calling, when we looked at our numbers, I think in total we rang around 42 numbers. Out of those 42, there's around 10 that are warm. So people that are interested, but just need a bit more time to think over things. And there's 4 or 5 who are highly interested.
Yeah, they were hot.
So they're hot. They want to do viewings. So when you look at those numbers, there's a really good book that says Go for No. And I forgot the author's name, but that's a really powerful book that people can listen to, because this is why it's really key to record what you're doing. Because when we continue doing the cold calling going forward, we'll be saying, well, on average, if we made 40 calls and there's 5 hot leads, that's a ratio of 10%. So all I need to do is make another 40 calls and generate an average of 5 leads. Definitely. So it gives you that momentum to keep going and going. So that's really powerful what you said there about cold calling. Now, going back to one about what you mentioned earlier. So website. People might think I haven't got enough money or a lot of money to do website as part of the marketing campaign. There's cheap ways to do it. So you can use Wix or create a website yourself. But what we found when we're making these phone calls, be it through cold calling or through Gumtree, the question was, have you guys got a website?
That's interesting.
Can I find out more about you? So my tip or recommendation is get something created. Yeah. Even if it's a 1-page website, just for that element of credibility.
Yeah, and actually, when I first started doing rent-to-rent way back when, and when I started training people in rent-to-rent, one of the mistakes I saw people doing at the start was they were focusing on stationery, getting a website, getting business cards and all this. And I said, don't bother with all that, because like the sort of landlords now who are coming through. So every few years that goes by, things change because of the age group of people change. You know, you have like baby boomers and Generation Z and, the silent generation and all this. You know, so you've constantly got people coming through. And one thing with the website, like if you look at people who are of the older generation, they're not really interested in seeing a website. So when we met Catherine, did she say anything about a website?
No.
She's not interested. She's of that generation that she isn't interested. That's why I put so much emphasis on us going there dressed really smartly and calling her Mrs. X, Mr. X, and putting all that emphasis on it, smiling, letting her see me, giving advice, because that is what that generation warms towards. They don't like all the slickness and all the sleazy sales talk. They don't like any of that. They just want genuine people to go and meet with them face to face, not over the phone. You know, I spoke to her over the phone. I could have never done a deal with her over the phone, because that sort of person, you have to shake hands. You have to meet, discuss, shake hands on it. And that is the best way to do it. Yeah. Brilliant.
But then for the generation that's coming through, there's a few that are now saying, let me see your website.
Yeah. So the younger people, so let's say Manoj, he was a younger guy that we met. He definitely wanted to see the website. He wanted to know, and again, because he'd been stung by another company, he definitely wanted to see like our website. He wanted to know the company details. He wanted to be able to look at our accounts, things like that.
Yeah.
But that's not how most landlords will be. You know, that's only in that situation, basically.
Yeah. I think that's a really good point that you made here. So people might, if you picked up on it, people might say, well, okay, I can create a website, but if they come back and say, let's see, so Manoj or a few others said, okay, how long have you been going? And one of the ways we usually try and solve that is by saying, look, our website's there, we've also been around for a number of years. But how would we, if someone that's new, brand new to rent, how are they going to get over that block of being a new provider?
I would just say, don't even think about it. Just play the numbers game. But I wouldn't even think about how can I get over that. I just play the numbers game. You know, call 20 people, write 50 letters, do all that. Because some of those people are going to have been stung and they're going to say, I want to see your accounts. I want to see this. I want to see that. You haven't got the same strength that we have as a company where we can show all that stuff. So don't even worry about it. Move on to the next person. Like if you had come across this lady who I mentioned, like Catherine, 70 years old, she's not interested in any of that stuff. She's never been approached before. No one's ever put a personal letter through a letterbox. No one even knows. It's not on any registers or anything like that. She's just an off-the-radar landlord. Someone like that you're going to get easily, like easily. And actually on the next podcast, we'll talk about how we got an incredible deal, not £1,200, but £700 per month rent on that.
Yeah.
As an HMO is ridiculous. And she's going to cover the costs of the licensing as well. So, you know, you've just got to find those right people.
Yeah. I think that's really important. So this is why having a variety of marketing tactics is really important. So you're not just relying on one. So you've got consistent numbers coming through, especially if you're a new provider. So you'll be able to say, okay, maybe someone's not interested today, but they could be interested in a few years or even a few months. And once you've got a 1 or 2 under your back pocket, you can go back to them and say, look, here's evidence. I've got a testimony.
Yeah.
Or I've got a landlord who could give you a good reference.
Yeah.
And in doing so, you'll be able to convert that lead even more.
Yeah.
So finishing off, then the last tactic was a HMO list.
Yeah.
So it's probably been battered by providers out there.
Well, tell them about, just quickly as we wrap up, tell them about what Philip said.
Yeah, definitely. So as I mentioned, so it's probably been one tactic being battered by everyone. Every provider, every trainer says go right to the HMO list. When we had an inquiry, so last week we sent only 10 letters out.
That was it, just 10.
And we had an inquiry from Philip. So when you look at that, it's like a 10% ratio.
Yeah.
Which usually for letters, it's quite a high number. But Philip
in the first week, yeah, in the first week.
So Philip is a very wealthy landlord, has several properties around Coventry. And he said, well, you guys, your letter stood out. It was a bit different to what I'd received. And that was really, really important because what we put out there was different to the crowds. There were subtle differences. And then I asked him the question because I was just intrigued, really intrigued. And you remember before that, me and you had a conversation saying, okay, how many times has someone been approached from the HMO list, right? So we asked the question to Philip, and Philip actually said, well, in the last 3 months, I've received near enough 30 letters or marketing pieces. Yeah. But your one stood out from the crowd. And then he spoke to us, and he's really interested in moving forward. Yeah. So it just shows you the power of taking a technique that's probably anyone can know to use this. A technique that's been out there, it's being battered, but making your own mark on it. Yeah. It's very important.
Yeah, definitely. And just for anyone that's interested in our letters, you can actually get that on the Property Cashflow Academy website. So it's in the documentation pack. It's all included in that pack. But just to wrap up then, that is really a summary of how we sourced 16 rent-to-rent leads. I'm not saying here that we're going to get all those properties, but that's how we got 16 leads within the space of a week. And so far we've had offers of 7. We've had firm offers of 7 properties. So that was a 6 and a 1 property already. And we haven't even really gone through the rest yet. So I think on the next podcast, we'll talk about Catherine, which was the lady we were talking about, and how we got that property. And then we'll talk about on the podcast after that. Let's talk about negotiations with the gentleman from Nigeria. That was an interesting, very interesting negotiation. So we'll talk about that. So thanks so much for listening, guys, and we'll see you on the next episode.